when the snow day happened, and we were off for 2 days, and my oldest was like, "I'm upset I'm not going to school." And I was like, "What have you done to him?"
We have the opportunity now to reinvent education. It's been the same for 100 years, everything we've gone through, our parents have gone through. But now's the chance to actually reinvent it going forward. We're innovating it. The kids are learning 10 times faster.
Yeah.
We're the only system in the world rolling this out. In the world of education, we have the most innovation in the world in Austin, Texas. We have more startup schools. There's more micro schools here. With Trilogy, my old company, we brought in 2,000 Ivy League kids and jump-started and brought a lot of talent into Austin that ended up being significant. I believe today, schools in Austin are bringing in the families who are the talent that are the next 10 and 20 years of Austin town.
Austin will go through kind of a rebirth.
Most advanced technology in the world, and if you can't actually build it or ship it, then what's the point?
You need storytellers who are able to paint the picture of what's happening at the frontiers of technology.
The U.S. needs to get back more to that and less like lawyerish and more we're building stuff.
The frontier isn't just a place, it's forged in the fire. Welcome to Austin Next.
No, welcome to Austin Next.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to start. I'm going to put everything out there. We're going to talk obviously a lot about Alpha School in Austin. My oldest goes to Alpha Middle School. My middle child's about to start there. So I'm clearly a biased participant in this. But I think what will be fun also is I get to put you on the hot seat as a parent.
Can't wait. Can't wait.
So first, I want to start off with, if people have or haven't heard about Alpha, give us the kind of the top level, what it is, and what you're building.
Sure. So Alpha is a network of high-end private schools. Our view is we have the opportunity now to reinvent education. It's been the same for 100 years, everything we've gone through, our parents have gone through. But now's the chance to actually reinvent it going forward and make it 10 times better than what we experienced. We make 3 commitments to every kid. The first is you will love school. And, when we hold this to a high standard, 90-some% of our kids say they love school. We actually ask a follow-up question, which is, do you love school more than vacation? And would you rather, actually the question is, would you rather go to school instead of vacation?
I was DMing you, giving you crap, like when the snow day happened, and we were off for 2 days, and my oldest was like, I want to go to school. I'm upset I'm not going to school. And I was like, what have you done to him?
43% of our kids said I'd rather go to school than go on vacation. And we work to keep getting that up. And that's just a crazy standard. And that's part of the reframing. We lived in a world where it's sort of like school sort of sucked, right? And you just put it up and your kids, that's just part of the game. And there's just no reason. If we're putting kids in school for 12 years, right, and we're going to put them through this, every parent should just realize you could put your kid in a school that they love. And so we really want to make that just normalized. And it's interesting, even talking to parents, I talk to a lot of business executives, who, they have tens of thousands of employees, and they're like, I work to make my company the best place to work. I want people to come love coming to work, right? I'm the employer of choice. And they're like, yeah, my kid should hate school for 12 years. And you're like, right, it's something that's in our brain that we need to just, swap out. And once you're in the system, right, and once you realize it, it becomes a big thing. So love school more than, kids must love school. The second is they need to learn 10 times faster, which is that because of advances in learning science and AI, and we'll talk about how you drive that, kids can learn 10 times faster. There were papers published when I was in high school about how kids can learn 2, 5, 10 times faster. There's a whole field of learning science where the schools of education at the Stanfords and Harvards and Oxfords have known this. The only problem is it doesn't work in a teacher in front of a classroom model. And so given that, what can you do? That was the only way we could do it. Obviously, because of AI and all this new stuff, you could actually now build a system where kids learn 10 times faster.
Question, the teacher in front of the classroom then, is it the 1 to 30 Or is it like if you had the one-on-one tutor, kind of the, Aristotle to Alexander the Great, I'd assume that would still work 10 times faster.
It would work almost 10. So actually the paper that was written had two parts. It's if you give every student an individualized tutor, right, a human next to them, and they actually can learn 1 sigma better. But the human has to enforce mastery, a mastery standard, which no school system in America enforces, which you have to do both to get them. And this is where when you get into, we use ed tech, it doesn't work, all of this, right? Ed tech has failed for 25 years. What's different this time? This time, the call is, it's not as much, the LLMs matter, but it's the learning science and things like mastery and the zones of proximal development and making sure the app is enforcing that and enabling the kids to thrive that way that get our crazy accelerated learning. If you want 10 times faster, you can get, 2-3 times faster with a personal tutor. This is why everybody hires tutors after school.
Right.
But even if you hire a tutor after school, those kids don't get up to the levels we do at Alpha because tutors generally don't enforce mastery.
Let's just jump straight into the AI component for a second, because the biggest thing I've seen on X, all these things is like, okay, well, screen time's bad and all this. So what's the...
So this is I wish it was a simple answer, but it's a complicated answer, which is there is bad screen time and there is bad AI. If you take a chatbot, the standard, here's ChatGPT, and you put it into a school, chatbots are cheat bots. 90% of kids are using it to cheat. They are not learning. It is terrible. When I hear we're going to ban, ChatGPT from our school, right? No screen time, great idea. We obviously believe very differently. We believe there's a good screen time and good AI used very differently. And so talking about how we do it is, first of all, it's only 2 hours a day. And when we talk about what the rest of the day is, that's the trade-off parents have to make, which is I totally understand the no screen time people, but when you hear my kid's going to love school and they get to do all these great workshops and life skills and team-based environments, when we talk about that, you're like, okay, that trade-off might be worth it. Really, if the kid's learning 10 times faster from the screen, maybe it's worth it. And that's where we have a lot of no screen time parents who, when they come to Alpha, are like, okay, I get why.
Right.
Why I would do it this way. But the core of what the AI is doing is it's not a chatbot. We've tried, and even in our environment, kids use it to cheat. So we turn off chat functionality in the morning, which is when they're doing the academic learning. And instead, what you're doing is you're creating personalized lesson plans for every kid, which is, age grade and knowledge grade are two different things in every human. They're the same thing, unfortunately, in a teacher in front of a classroom model. So you can think about this, which is, if you're a 8th grader, but because of COVID or however happened, you're really in 4th grade knowledge, or 3rd grade, if you're bottom 25%, and if you're in an 8th grade class, you can't read. Right. They're going to hand out 8th grade material, and there's no chance you can learn. They're giving you algebra, and you're like, I don't know 4 times 8, and so what you need to do in that case is not give 8th grade material to the age grade 8-year-old. You need to give them 4th grade material and a 3rd grade phonics lesson or multiplication tables. And that's where the individualized tutor, right? The AI tutor is perfect because it's sitting there. He's like, oh, it can figure out what you know and don't know very easily. And it's just like, oh, okay, I'm going to give you a 4th grade lesson. And what's crazy about this whole thing is if you do that and you give kids lessons at the right difficulty, not too hard, not too easy, the zone of proximal development, which is 80 to 85%. If you're at 99%, you already know it, right? You're just regurgitating. At 66%, right, you get massive disengagement. If they get it, it's too hard, right? Then they disengage. Every game developer, right? We can talk about that later. Every game developer tell you this is the right zone to keep them engaged. So our apps are giving you an unending stream of lessons and difficulty right where you need it. Those kids who can come in years behind can catch up. It takes our students on average between 20 and 30 hours to catch up one subject, one grade level. So 4th grade math, it's 22 hours. 5th grade math, right, is like 26 hours. And so when you hear I'm a couple years behind, you're like, you're like 50 hours behind. Why don't you do an hour of homework and you're all of a sudden going to catch up?
I will say it is one of the, I'd heard this before, it is one of the psychological things as a parent to get over, because so we've only been in this is our first year, right? My son would get 90s on the math. So, very good student and that stuff. And then did the diagnostic. And I literally emailed the guys, I'm like, something broke. Something's wrong. No, this isn't. It was something very low in like math. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Yeah. And it's been funny because he's in, we were saying this, he's in 6th grade, came in at that, again, consistently 99s in the map, came in something very low in the map. Clearly it was one thing, got the Swiss cheese on a thing. And now he's in 9th grade math. And he's even said now, it's gotten hard. It's now hit and he's like, algebra and this integrated math, it's hard. And I get it. And he's at that zone where he's kind of pushing, but it's your first instinct, no, it's fine. What are you talking? Your test is wrong.
So the crazy stuff. A lot of my job I've learned in the last 4 years as principal. I became principal is figuring out how to message this to parents, because we all have just an old framework, and we look at it as our guides educate kids. Our marketing and what my job is our job is to educate parents. To this point, I give a talk second week of school every year to all the parents. I'm like, look, you're about to get the reports. Your kid's going to be behind. The average kid who transferred in from a high-end private school, who had A's at their high-end private school, was 2.2 grade levels behind. And so I give that news. And then obviously as a parent, you're like, that can't be true. Oh my gosh. I'm like, don't worry.
It's true for other kids, not mine.
Exactly. And you catch them up.
Yep.
Right. And then then we accelerate them forward, which is the second thing that you can do is, what parents don't understand. And a phrase they have is, especially if you have a gifted student, you're like, I know standard school is holding my kid back. You don't realize how much, right? You just don't realize how much it's holding them back. And so there's a first catch-up phase, but then all of a sudden your kid was accelerating. So this is literally in 1 year where you came in, you're like, whoa, wait, why is he behind?
Right.
Oh, wait, he's way ahead.
Yeah.
And that acceleration happens to all the, not all the kids, but lots of the students. And that is just the big breakthrough of how much your kids can learn and how fast it is, because it really is 20 to 30 hours per grade level per subject. And we think 200, right? Because there's 180 school days and we did homework. So in your head, you're like, I'm 3 years behind. You're like, that's like a lifetime. I'll never catch up.
Yeah.
This is like our homework, few months, you're going to be caught up before Christmas. No problems. So that's the breakup of why, and as alpha parents, right, that once you get in it and you start to realize this, right, you're just like, okay, this is gonna, it actually gets to the next question, which is, I'll take our third commitment.
Yeah.
Once you realize my kid can learn 10 times faster, one of the things you say is, I don't actually want to put 10 times more academic knowledge in. I don't want him just sitting there all day doing it. I actually want him or her to learn all the life skills. Right? Which is what the third commitment is, which is we're going to teach you all the life skills that are going to let you thrive in the real world. So leadership and teamwork, right? Entrepreneurship and financial literacy, storytelling and public speaking, relationship building and socialization, grit and hard work. And then you're going to have these afternoon where there is no screen time, right? Where instead you're going to be doing these project-based workshops with your team. There's going to be, right, the adults in charge, right? We call them guides and coaches. And you're going to be doing these things that are super fun, super challenging, right? But teaching you all those life skills. And so when I look at it is that when you look at Alpha, those three commitments, which is your kid, what's going to be different about school? You're going to be like, they're going to love it, right? They're going to crush their academics very quickly, a couple hours a day. And then third, they're going to be doing these great projects and engaging life skills, which will get them ready for this AI world that's coming. And so that's our commitment. And so we've been building that school. I've been principal 4 years. The first few years were all, basically product design. How do we get this?
Yep.
And now we're scaling it.
Is there a motivational honeymoon? And then also, as you're seeing the first, we're like 1 or 2 classes have graduated.
Yeah.
And the real world isn't quite set up the same. So is it almost a motivational crash? How are we kind of seeing that extended?
So 2 parts. No, the motivation, they love school, right? And, my highlight was last May as principal was last May, 2/3 of our high schoolers who've been here for a while sent me an email and said, will you keep the school open this summer? Because we don't want to take a summer break, which I was like, I did not like school. It's just like so insane. We have unleashed a monster, right? It's great. And And the reason is, if kids are working on challenging projects with each other, with their peers that they love, that is very challenging, hard projects, they want to keep working on it. That's why they want to stay instead of vacation, because they're doing things that they consider significant, right, and meaningful, and that. And that doesn't change even as they've been there. They just take on harder challenges, right? That team is trying to build an app that will convince 100 million teens the key to their happiness is contributing to their community, right? And they're just like, this is the most awesome, and they get to work with some influencers, right, that they want to. And so they have all this all wrapped together, and these kids are like, what else do I want to do instead of this? This is awesome. So that part on motivation, where we do see it is there is a honeymoon period, just to talk. The honeymoon period is when parents come in, their first year, we asked them to rate the workshops in the afternoon. What do you think about the workshops? And the workshops, if you're a first-year parent, are like, this is the most transformational thing I've ever seen in my life. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen. Oh my God. Because they're comparing to their old school.
Right.
Year two, you are going to have a different judgment. You're going to be like, well, this workshop this year, remember last year when they went to Poland to train the 1,000 Ukrainian refugees? Well, this year we didn't do that. And so relative to last year, the workshop didn't measure up.
I hate to tell you, it hit for us like session 2. Session 1, we were like, this is us. Session 2 is like, no, but that's what's good. And like right now, they're doing a AI debate, so they're like a national debate, and then building a rocket. Those are the two things this. And it's funny how it becomes motivational. Like my son always says that the Monday of the new session is his favorite day because he finds out what the workshops are.
This is actually interesting, and when we talk about like what's important, like about Alpha is the parent feedback. I mean, student feedback. We drive everything on making a school kids love, but the parents are really critical too. Which is part of this is what are the life skills that we all want, and we're sort of co-developing it, which is, what is the real answer as we, as this world changes, and how this workshop work. So, sometimes we're like, I don't know if this workshop's going to work. We talk to the parents about it. We're like, okay, let's go and let's see. And then 8 weeks later, we sit and say, was this a home run, or, was it too hard for the kids, or the kids didn't love it as much as we thought? What's the feedback around doing this?
Yeah. How do you think about the workshops from the perspective of there's the public speaking, leadership, those kind of things versus hard skills that aren't going to be taught in the academic situation, like with it, coding, robotics, engineering, whatever, those kind of things. We're like, these are probably valuable to have. So how do you think about building those in?
We think there's two sets of skills, right? There's sort of core skills, and we would talk about receiving feedback, right? Uplifting your classmates, right? The core things that you want, which are in the long term, the ones that matter, right? Becoming a self-driven learner, right? Those things are the ones that really matter long term. There's shorter term vocational like skills, which is, okay, I can vibe code, right? So we have workshops where the kids are all learning OpenClaw. Is OpenClaw the thing they're going to be using 10 years from now? Probably not.
No.
But it's awesome right now.
For too much longer, given that Anthropic's trying to cutting it off.
All these different things. But right now, right, the kids love it. They're building all of it. It's a super valuable skill if you're trying to learn it. Now our students are using it, and they've actually, I don't know if you've seen some of this, we have kids making tens of thousands of dollars, right, in 10 days, right, from getting on OpenClaw and building agents that go make money. They're presenting at South by. The founder of OpenClaw is literally retweeting them. And so while that's vocational, in that it's not a long-term skill, it's a great one to teach skills. It drives motivation. Our balance on the afternoon workshops a lot are, do the kids really love it, right? Is this something and what's the skill they're going to learn at the same time? But learning how to build an agent, a swarm-based agent, or a swarm of agents is super valuable.
Right.
And so we would do that. And we balance those. The same thing. It's, in the old world, schools had this same thing. It was called shop class. Right. And there is...
We've actually brought back shop class finally.
We brought back shop class. And when we talk about expansion, we're looking at true vocational schools where like these people are going to be able to get a job in in an advanced manufacturing facility out of it. As we talk with some of the public school system of how do we make sure people are job ready. Those afternoons can be used for that.
Yeah, I do think when we talk about like agency, creativity, like those are autonomy, those are the superpowers. And it is interesting, that's been unlocked in my son, and now he uses the AIs to teach him about things. So he's coding, he's deciding he wants to go after like bug bounties for like OpenAI. So he's using he's using Claude, and then he was downloading open source models. I was like, can you tell me next time? Like, he was like, I got Llama, DeepSeek. I was like, no, delete DeepSeek right now. It's like, you just got to tell me before you do this. But then wanting to like go after, get the context window of OpenAI using prompt injections, and then submit that for a bug bounty. I was like, awesome. I understood all that. The next sentence you say, I don't have any idea what you're saying.
Well, and that's back to this of when you teach kids, right, how to becoming a self-driven learner is actually the core of what you have to do.
Yeah.
And it's the core of what, for our academics to work in the morning, they have to, right? We have to teach them how to be a self-driven learner. And by the time you get to our high school, right, we say, K through 8, back to our life skill stack of how we test it, it's you can learn anything academic on your own. Any 8th grader who's been through our whole stack for a while, embedded in the Alpha system, can say, I can get a 5 on any AP that I pick. I can pick one of the random APs, learn it on my own. Every middle schooler knows everything you want to learn is on YouTube. They will figure out how to learn it to mastery, take the test and get a 5. Now, at a middle school, you don't get credit for the APs, however that works, but they can do that. When you go to high school, we're like, take that skill of being a self-driven learner academically and apply it to the real world, which is what their big afternoon projects are. Their Alpha X projects are doing something that's not academic. But we have a student she's launching the first all Broadway musical, team produced. Yeah. There's no guide at Alpha who knows how to put on a Broadway musical. She had to take her academics, right? I know how to learn anything, to go say, okay, I'm going to have to go learn how to put on and produce a musical. And oh my God, I got to learn about music rights and, all those things.
How are you thinking about when the recruiting of the guides and getting the right people? Because on one hand, I talk about us where you're obviously paying them very well, but there is like I hear other schools, even like high-end schools, are having recruitment issues. What is like the profile? I mean, are there ones, I know that there are at least some that are former teachers or are standard teachers, but are there other, like what's the profile kind of look like?
The unlock for us is, the reason that there's a teacher shortage, right, that occurs is the teacher spec's complicated. You have to be a domain expert in 7th grade science. You have to not just know it, you have to be able to teach it. You then also have to be able to connect and motivate students. Right. Right. And then 4th, you have to deal with parents. And then 5th, you have administration. So there's these 5 specs, and which is any HR director, will tell you that's a complicated spec. And then in America, we underpay them and then wonder why no one applies for the job. Mm-hmm. And so back to I'm sort of new to education. I saw that. I'm like, well, every HR person I had said, simplify the spec, pay more money. So that's how we solve the problem, which is, so in Austin, we pay, a minimum of $100,000 for our guides on up, which is, I think AISD is like 56 or something like that is sort of their average. And then second, you don't need to be the 7th grade science expert because the AI does it. And second, you don't have to read the 10,000 learning science papers of how to teach kids most effectively. The third element, connect and motivate kids, you need to be the world's best. And so we had 80,000 applications for our guide roles. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants this job. Some are, probably 40% are ex-teachers, the best teachers in the world, teacher of the year all over. They're coming into our system, but others are not. We have ex-athletes, ex-coaches, right? If you can, the ex-head of Cirque du Soleil training, if you can connect and motivate students, right? Hold high standards and high support, then we're going to bring you in. And so that's really and then actually the deal with parents, that part we also took out. We created a new role that most schools don't have called the Dean of Parents. Right. To deal with that because because
we're annoying?
Well, it was actually interesting when I came in and I was learning the system. They're like, look, this guide, she's great with kids, is great with parents, don't promote. This one over here, he's not as good with the kids, but he's really great with parents, promote. That schools promote the people who can deal with the customer. Right, yeah. The customer. And I was like, oh my God, I never want that. I want the person who is the world's best with kids. And I'll hire a totally separate role who can deal with parents. Mm-hmm. And we have to educate our parents on a lot of things, so it's an important role. But the core of what our guides are you the world's best with an 8-year-old? Mm-hmm. I don't care how you are with a 38-year-old. And so that's the guide role, is can you connect and motivate students? And when you think about this, because this is one of the controversial things of our school, obviously, of AI robot terminators and all this. And every alpha parent will say, no, the guides are the most important part, because they are. And when you think back we actually survey all the parents, you know, and the kids, which is to all the kids we ask in middle school, at kindergarten, we're like, do you love your guide? In middle school, we're like, every adult had one or two teachers who transformed their life. Is your guide that for you?
That was one of the things that ended up part of it driving us to make the switch, right? So my fourth grade teacher and then my bio and chem teachers in high school, 1,000%. And through, you know, we're in a very good school district. Yeah. That's why we moved there. And we're like, not one of the teachers that we can point to, some were fine, but none that were like that for any of my kids. And it's like, what's going on here?
And the issue is, when you think back about the role, it wasn't because they graded your 7th grade science quiz so well and, oh, look how I marked up your paper. It was because they connected with you, saw that you could do awesomeness, and they motivated you to go do it. Teachers became teachers to transform kids' lives, not grade 7th grade science quizzes. So when you talk about our system, everybody's like, oh my God, you need a teacher in front of a classroom. I'm like, teachers want to connect with the kids. Like we don't have turnover on our guide staff. We call them guides and, you know, coaches. We don't have turnover because they're doing their life's mission, connecting and motivating kids, right? And they're like, oh my God, I don't have to go home and grade my stack of papers, right? And so this is why the role, while it's scary that it's changing and it's different wording, it is exactly what teachers want to do. And the best ones, right, who transformed our lives, this is what our guides do every day. And when we say that's what you're going to do, we go get the world's best because of that. Pay them enough so we can, you know, pull them in.
Okay, so the other big knock on alpha is selection effect. I was telling you before, like, I think there is a selection effect, but not the one that everyone attacks.
Yeah. So I'm going to do a bunch of selection effects on this because I obviously get this a lot. First off, just to be clear on selection effects, if you're a high-end private school, there are selection effects. Now, that said, compare us to other high-end private schools. Our academics just crush them, right? I'll take my top 5 graduates. I have the smallest class among a St. Stephen's or a St. Andrews or any of the Catholic schools around, or any of the private schools around here. I'll take my top 5 seniors and what colleges they got into against their top 5, even though their class is, you know, 10 times bigger than mine. And right, we just academically outperform everybody. So that would be one answer to selection effects. There's a second one, which is I'm a product guy. And I absolutely design my product for the customer. I select the customer and then design the product for them. And so when we talk about some of these other things, you know, there's a view in education that if you design and have a school, it has to serve all people, all types, all at once. And the answer is, that is the worst product design in the world. You're like, everything to everybody is not a product design. And those always fail. So, you know, sort of traditional education is don't select, but fail the kids. We're like, no, select, but succeed. So for example, when we talk about our sports academy, I select for kids who love sports. And if you don't love sports, that school's going to fail for you, right? We have a different school, which is our gifted school, right? Those are ones when you say, what would make you love school? They're like more academics. That's like 1 in 20 kids. That 5%,
right?
We have built a school for them, right? They don't do 2 hours. They get math Olympiad in the workshops. So when you think about, if you want to build a school that kids love, right, more than vacation, you have to design it for them, right? And thus select for them, right? Now, the other part that you have to have that we select super for is parents. That, you know, if you're in K through 6, right, and people are like, oh, who succeeds? I'm like, well, let me talk to the parents and I'll let you know. 50% of the admissions is, are you aligned?
Yeah.
Right? Because at K through 6, right, the parent alignment that we're selecting for parents who say things like, well, no, I understand screen time or AI. I understand this is going to be new, right? We're looking for parents who say, you know, we call them, when we open a new school, the founding families. No one wants to be first, right? When the school's been around for a decade and you've had thousands of graduates and it's proven, right? There's that set of parents. We need the parents, right? The day you open, you don't have that.
Yeah.
Right? We need the parents who are like, no, I understand when I look at the future of what the world's going to be like, we need to educate kids differently. The old status quo will not succeed. And
we've noticed like it's a lot of entrepreneurs, it's a lot of, it's the people who are a little more contrarian at nature and be like, yeah, I'm willing to take a bet, even if it's like literally taking a bet on your kid's future. But at the same time, like I remember when we signed him up, we were like, so if we don't like it, we can drop out. Like we kind of figured out this whole thing. Like we're experimenting. He's being the guinea pig.
Yeah, no, that's actually one, which is the guinea pig's a great one, which is there's, oh my God, they're using kids as guinea pigs. There's, thank God my kid is going to be able to experiment in a new system. It's the same thing, which way you see it as, and we obviously need the parents of the former. We just, even like our apps, we roll out our new apps, right? And we roll out a new version. And it's the first time this has been rolled out to humanity, right? This isn't, right? Because we're innovating it. The kids are learning 10 times faster. Yeah. We're the only system in the world rolling this out. And, and it does mean that you understand, our students, like I have a dozen kids. I've Sparta group at Alpha High, and these are the kids who I'm like, if you're going to be in Sparta group, I'm going to come up with crazy ideas and you are the test bed, right? We're going to figure out, what really happens here. And, those kids, we have been generating static AI, right, to a lesson and then have human review because the AI wasn't good enough to do dynamic, right? Too many errors. But I'm like, to those guys, I'm like, we're going to give you the dynamic, and they're going to take screenshots and be like, look at what AI said today. And so there is that element, of where you want to be on. If you are super happy, if you're a kindergarten mom and you're like, I look at the educational system that I went through and that if my kid could just replicate that exactly, and that's totally going to get him ready for the world in a dozen years, then we definitely aren't the school back to selecting. You should go to the traditional school who will do the same thing they've done for 100 years, right? And put your kid into that 100-year-old system. If you instead say, I'm looking forward 12 years and it seems like the world's going to be different and I need to get my kid ready for that. And I want him surrounded by other kids doing that. And I want to be in a parent group who thinks that same thing. Like that we have this opportunity where kids could love it and learn 10 times faster and all that. If you buy into that, then we're the perfect place. And yes, we select for that.
One of the things I want to bring up, so you are fast and like a startup. And to your point, it has pros and cons, right? Yep. Like I have found very responsive and iterative that there was an issue that like we had like one of the workshops, it wasn't clear what the test to pass was and all this kind of stuff. And I made a little bit of noise and other people kind of agreed. And then now we have a Zoom meeting at the beginning of every session saying, here's exactly what's going on in the workshops. Here's that. So at the same time, I will say, and this is the one piece that my son wanted to bring up. So Alpha Right, he's like, it definitely had an update recently because it was not great in the beginning. And so there was times that he was very challenged with that app because it wasn't what it needed to be. Yeah. And so how do you think about that balance?
This is perfect. This is great because we struggle with this constantly, right? And back to parent feedback, right? It's moderated by the feedback from kids and adults, which is how aggressively can you turn the knob? Mm-hmm. And so, for example, on workshops, we very much are where it's an 8-week loop, right? Where we try them and we basically get the parents aboard and then say, okay, we're going to do it. And then we see if it works. And if it works, then we'll use it all the time. To give you an example, 18 months ago, Faith, our second grade guide, she's like, okay, we're going to have all the second graders run a 5K. And I was like, oh, the parents are not going to like that. Are you sure? Right. She was UT athlete. So I'm like, oh, really? Are you really sure? She's like, no, we're going to teach atomic habits. It's a perfect workshop, where they're going to learn this great life skill and, they'll declare it's impossible and then they'll all do it. I'm like, are they all going to do it? Right. Anyway, that whole thing where we go through that debate, right? Yep. And all the parents and all the kids said, this is an impossible workshop. Yep. And she's like, this is going to be, don't worry. And so we're like, okay, let's go, Faith. And so, she gets everybody out to the track and they all have declared this is impossible. And then they walk the track. All of them can walk. She's like, I've signed you guys all up for the Jingle 5K in Maine. And looks like you're all going to finish because we can all just walk the race. And then the next time, they came out the next time, they ran quarter lap and walked the rest. And from August to December, right? And then they went half a lap and then a full lap. And by the Jingle 5K, those kids are running 30, 35-minute 5Ks. And they cross the finish line And they're just like, Mom, Dad, I can do anything because I know 1% better. And this is the part when we talk about life skills, why this is such a great example. Everybody reads the Atomic Habits post-college in their 20s or 30s, and they're like, wow, this is a huge insight. Yeah. Like, I should, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, or a journey one step at a time? We just teach kids 1% better. When you're trying something that's really hard, just, take it on. Second graders can understand that. And once you teach them that skill, then they sat down with their dad. They're like, I can do 50 push-ups. I'll do 1 today and 2 tomorrow. Right. That is a life skill that we should teach every second grader in this country, right? It just is. And then done on this, where they thought it was impossible, you showed them that they could do things that were hard, and then have this life skill that's completely done. Now, that one worked. And so everybody's like, yay, it's happiness. To your point, sometimes they don't work as well. Now, it's only 8 weeks, right? We have 5 sessions of them. You figure it out, and it's not the end of the world. And the kids, after they do them, after you've been at Alpha a while, you're like, okay, yeah, this workshop's not working. Like 4 weeks in, they'll sit and, our experienced, students will be telling the guys, they're like, this is not going to end well. And so but it is that level of innovation where that's why you need the right culture, right? You need the right families, right? If you don't believe in this, and you just hear this thing, you're like, this just seems like a really weird school that I don't want my kid in. I want just the traditional. You're not going to like that experience.
Now, how do you think about the software side?
And then we'll talk about the software. So that's the life skill side. Now let's talk about Alpha Right. Mm-hmm. So Alpha Right there's 2 things this year that were the big changes. So in August, when I sat in front of all the parents at the beginning, I said, there's 2 things we're rolling out this year. The first is a whole new math curriculum, which is going to teach kids 20%. It's going to teach them more in 20% less time. Because, we measure everything. We know exactly how long it is. It's a huge improvement. We're already the best math. It's getting even better. Yeah. Back to the results that your son's getting. It's because of this new math program. But when we rolled it out, it hadn't been tested. It was new. Mm-hmm. We tested it internally and stuff, but you never really know until everybody's using it. 8 weeks later, I got in front of the parents, and I'm like, okay, if you're in 4th through 12th grade, thumbs up. System's working great. We're crushing it. We're above 20%, right? We're exceeding our expectations. If you're in K through 3, it's not working. The kids have too much freedom. We need to constrain it. So we're going to roll out changes so that we can get them back on it. And now the commitment we make to parents is your kid will learn twice as much in 2 hours a day as if they sat in class for 6 and did homework, right? That's our academic commitment. And so when we roll something out new on the app side, we have margin of error on that. Mm-hmm. And so we know that even if we make a mistake, we can recover and still deliver that each year to the kids. So 8 weeks in on K through 3, we're like, ooh, this is not working. But we have the data. We know exactly why it wasn't working. And then we fix it, and then we roll out the new changes. And so for us, basically what we tell parents is we're going to deliver the 2X in 2 hours. And sometimes we say, ooh, look, this is improved to 20%, right? Which actually frees up more time to do things like Alpha Right, et cetera. And now let's take Alpha Right. So math was one of these great examples where really good 4th through 12th, wasn't good. Now both are on track. The second, Alpha Right's a great one. Writing is like the most important thing. And when standard school, it's a fiasco, right? Kids now are just ChatGPTing their papers, and parents have no idea, which is until your kid writes an FRQ on an AP test or their college application essay, that's really, as a parent, the first time you read and realize, oh my gosh, my kid can't write. And he's been ChatGPTing or she's been ChatGPTing everything. And so this is where kids are the farthest behind. So all these transfers in, I've freshmen in our high school who transferred in from a $50,000 private school who cannot write a grammatically correct 3rd and 4th grade sentence. Mm-hmm. And so Alpha Right is our solution to that. So in August, we were like, this is a hard one because it's leading edge of AI, right? It is going through and forcing you to learn how to write sentences, and then sentences to paragraphs, and paragraphs to outlines to essays. And it's using the generative part. It's not static. So it's right at the edge of what the models could do. And we're like, there's going to be some hiccups, but writing is so important, right? We got to do it. And we rolled it out, and it was too strict. I'm sure his issue was if he was in the 3rd and 4th and 5th grade stuff going, he's like, it is nitpicky. It is too strict. It is not. It should say that's okay. Yeah. And so
I said that when you showed me stuff.
Parents too. So we had to tweak it, right? And we had to sit here and figure out, okay, where is it to go? And for us, though, we were just like, the value of it is worth the pain. We do sit and consciously think this through, and we make our best estimate. We get the feedback. Now, our language and grammar scores from August to January were record high, and it's all because of Alpha Right. And so while it was a little harder for the kids, right, the return in that test period, right, where they're really learning grammar well, right, they're learning how to write, is phenomenal. And now it's dramatically better. There's still some things we still have to improve on it. But on that curve, you know, it's very much because we have this community, right, of parents and students where we're like, look, it's 2 hours a day. You know, there's going to be a painful 10 minutes. You know, let's go figure it out. That's part of the balance.
It is also the one place that I feel like when I've seen, like you showed me the apps and different things you're doing, that it is the 100% promise of what we talk about with AI, because he put in like, what do you want to write about? And he's like, I would want to write about Legend of Zelda. And so he's like literally writing sentences like that. Okay, great. At least that'll keep you more engaged than like random talk about. Yeah. Was the first time he ever did it, he was like food, and that was when we saw he was getting so nitpicky on some of these things. But the whole point was it was like not that. And then as soon as he said like, let me do Legend of Zelda, it's like, no, that's at least more entertaining.
Being able to write about what you love, right? All of a sudden you have more tolerance than when you're writing about. So food was a bad one for pick because he didn't care. Allowing kids to write about what they love allows them to be like, okay, I want this to be great. You tell a bunch of middle school boys, you're going to have a debate about what the best video game is, and you're going to go write about it, and you have to convince the rest of your class. Those kids who will write forever a very persuasive essay. They will learn how to write a persuasive essay in order to convince their classmates. They won't know that's what they're doing, but that's what they're in. So that is part of it. Which AI right at the edge, you know, it allows it. We have a reading one, Teach Tales, where you can take a third grade boy who's like, I hate books, and you're like, oh, what's your favorite movie? The Avengers. Okay, who are your soccer buddies? And then you do a choose your own adventure at his Lexile level, which is dynamics, right? Right there, you know, within 10% of their difficulty level. He will sit here from I hate books to I will sit there for an hour, right? Where I'm saving the world with my buddies. And that is only able to be done with Gen AI, right? And so there's the worry about what AI can be, and I believe when it's chatbots and stuff, it can be bad. But as you see in things like Alpha Right and all these new apps we're getting, and how fast kids are learning, it's also magic. Yeah. Right? It unlocks, if letting kids learn 10 times faster is just something we should, as parents, really want for our kids.
One of the things I've noticed also in the kind of the iteration is the motivational models, right? And you've changed it a couple times, different things from like weekly XPs to daily, and you know, and a lot of things are going. How are you thinking about the like carrot versus stick when creating those motivational? And then also, how do you get the feedback to say like, oh yeah, that like we're versus no, we're gonna have a revolt on our hands.
This is 100% what our guides own that. So our guide's job is motivating, right, and supporting kids. You know, if you and one step back on the guides. Dr. Yeager, right, from UT, he's written a book, 10 to 25, The Science of Motivating, you know, kids. Every parent should read it. It's really awesome. Anyway, he's the one who helped design our guide training, right, and what it is. And he has a mentor mindset, which is, and every development expert will say, kids need high standards and high support. And that's what our guides do. And so to your question on carrot and stick, we hold high standards for them, right? But we're going to give them high support. Most parents, by the way, are one or the other. Most parents are either high standards, low support, just throw them in, figure it out, kid. Or they're the opposite, which is really high support, low standards. I never want my kid to struggle. Both of those are bad. You need high standards and high support. And so that's the environment we have. And so what our guide's job on motivating them and supporting them is, what does motivate the student? And because they know all their kids, right, and that's where they spend their time, they know the motivational model. And they make up ones constantly, right? It's actually not as much app-based as guides will do, both level-based, right? They'll do individuals for the kids. You know, that kid wants a sticker, right? You know, we had one third grader who would not engage in the apps, right? No matter what the app XP was. And the guide was like, I know you love bird watching, so we're going to do a workshop where we go to Home Depot and build a bird feeder, put it out on the green belt, and I'm going to put binoculars on my desk. And as soon as you finish your apps, you can go out on the deck. And this is a student whose parents were like, oh, my kid can't do 25 minutes is, the 25 minutes can't do it. This kid's finishing him in 12 minutes so that he would free up the time to go do it. And you're like, see, it's just a motivation issue. And that's what our guides do all day, is figuring out what they are. They design them for their levels, right? Have what is an epic day, or there's things like mobile squad, which is, and they're all age different, right?
Yeah.
Kindergarten is different than a middle schooler, than our high schoolers. It gets harder as they get older, believe it or not. But like mobile squad's one kids love, which is, oh my God, I get to go on this trip if I hit this. And, the guides will design whatever that is. And some kids are motivated by lots of different things, and different kids have different. We have 25% of the kids who are just pure challenge, competitive. They're like, put up a leaderboard and I'm going to beat everybody on the leaderboard. That's, but it's 25% of the kids, that's magic.
Yeah, that's fun.
Other kids are not. Other kids are like, you know what? If you have a team challenge, that will motivate me, because I want to be part of the team and I will never let my team down. You have some students who are just completion oriented, right? And so you have those kind. So we literally tailor all these different motivational models. We believe, back to product design, there's two things every educator says you need to educate a kid. The first is a motivated student, and the second is put them in lessons of the correct difficulty. That second is what ed tech does really well. It'll figure out what you know and don't know and give you lessons at that level. That is 10% of the solution. The reason ed tech has failed is because you pretend it's 100% when it's really 10. 90% is motivating the student. So this is our whole our product name is Time Back. And the single biggest motivator, if you want to motivate a student, is give them their time back to do stuff they want to do, right? Stuff they love. And that's what our school design is, right? Which is, there's the 2 hours, and they will engage in the app because they get to do all the other stuff the rest of the day. So that's what our guides do. That's how we look at all these motivations. When you talk about carrots and sticks, it's holding high standards and earning privileges, right? You don't grant privileges, you have to earn them.
Yeah.
And that's how the world works. And you kids learn that very quickly. And in that environment, they learn to unlock them.
Once we think about the startup environment, like the ability to fail and learn from failure, and that being okay, like I'd heard stories about like, oh, the kids don't earn the trip or whatever. And there was a camping trip that he didn't earn. That was more than we said. There was a little bit of confusion. It devastated him not being able to go. I think it was like maybe a quarter didn't go or something like that. There is a year-end trip. I've never seen him more motivated. He's like, I got to finish this one to do it, and like the fire that was under him to make sure and hit that one.
This is a great one, because this is a great example, which is kids fail. Right. And in, first grade, we're going to have a failure button, like an easy button where failure's fuel. And when they fail, they hit the button, they get cheered to show people failure is learning, right? And you have to have a culture where failure is celebrated. But to this one, our guide's job when students fail is to support them through the failure. This is where you're not leaving them in the deep end, right? One of the things that we always talk about with our guides is, the child development experts will say, the key to development, the key to self-confidence, the key to resilience is that kids struggle and fail on their road to success, supported by a caring adult, right? And that is our guide loop, right? That's what we just loop on all day long. And whether it's done via academics or workshops, right? That's their job. I add in as principal, after I learned this, I'm like, kids struggle and fail, sometimes cry, on their road to success, supported by a caring adult. Our guide's job is to make sure that if that cry happens, it happens in the school and we don't send it home, right? We can't be a school where we're like, oh well, here you go, right? We have to be able to support the kid through that whole loop where they realize it is disappointing in the moment, but the long term is great. And if you fail most workshops, your tripped ones are different. But if you fail most workshops, during break week, the week after the next session, you can make up the ones. Like the first time we made all the third graders do a Rubik's Cube, everybody except 2 kids passed the test to pass, within the session, which was another one parents thought were impossible. Oh my God, third graders can't do Rubik's Cube. The 2 who didn't
can't do a Rubik's Cube. So.
The 2 who didn't did it the first week back,
right?
And everybody's like, okay, it's fine. And so that whole concept of how do you build a culture, right, where kids can fail. It's always disappointing to fail, but that is just part of life, and then how it makes sure it provides motivation going forward.
I want to step out of Alpha for a minute into kind of like Alpha and Austin.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the origin of Alpha being in Austin is because I don't know Mackenzie, but like, I want something else for my kids. I'm going to go create it. And I live here in Austin, so we're going to create it here. Yeah. One, correct me if that's right or wrong. And then the second is, okay. And then the second piece then is, Alpha's not the only kind of education, experimentation, innovation that you wouldn't know that coming in. Like I was like many people, I moved here in 2020, we moved to Austin for Austin. And then it was like, oh, there's a lot of interesting experiments that are all kind of happening here. It's something in the water. Like, one, why do you think, what is it about Austin that's kind of driving that?
I think that's a great point. So Mackenzie started it, 12 years ago because she wanted something for her kids. But Austin is the center of education, right? In the world of education, we have the most innovation in the world in Austin, Texas. We have more startup schools. There's more micro schools here, right? You have the acting academies, you have the UATXs, you have just full Socratic experience. You have so many great educators, right? You have so many great learning scientists, right? You have all of this. And then most importantly, getting back to why I think it is you have the parents who want something different. That if you really want the old way, there's 100,000 schools you can send your kid to. If you want innovation in education, there actually aren't lots of places that are great new opportunities. The number of people who move to Austin to send their kids to these new places, whether it's Alpha or some of these other ones, right, is huge. Some of my schools have 30% of people who move to the city because their city doesn't have anything. So Austin is, I believe, because of the parents who in 2000, and maybe it was COVID when we had all the remote workers come in,
right? Everybody
relocate here. They're all like, I need new schools, right? And they're like, okay, well, it's all messed up anyway in Zoom school and all this craziness. Let me try these new ones. Oh, wow, look, this is awesome. Let me keep going. For parents to try, no one actually wants their kid to be this guinea pig,
right,
when it's completely untrusted, just craziness, right? Reckless guinea pig. No one wants that. In Alpha, to move schools, you need two things. You need a reference from a parent you trust, who's like, this is crushing it for my kid, right? You want that, you need that reference. And then the second thing is you need to see a kid at the school do something your kid can't do that you value. Whether it's they love school or, the academics or life skills, whatever you care about. If you have those two things, you're like, ooh, I will try this. And in Austin, we just have so many parents who've done it. They're like, oh, I tried that school. It was really awesome. And here's why. And so I believe that is the key. And because you have those parents, that attracts the other educational innovators, because that is the gate. If you go into a community and everybody's like, well, call me back after 10 years and 5,000 kids of proof, no educational innovator can do anything.
Did we have this sense of the education experimentation pre-2020? A lot of it, obviously Alpha was before that, but a lot of it, as you're saying, you're like, okay, well, we have a founder class, but you don't see this so much in SF.
Yeah.
But to your point, a lot of it was like, I'm frustrated with the system, whatever the system is, and that's why I moved to Austin.
Yeah.
And I'll just do it myself, right? Like a lot of people kind of went that direction.
Correct. And you have things, who've been for, like Acton is a great one here in Austin that's been around forever, right? And 300 schools that they've done because of the innovation that's here. So I don't know how it got started in Austin.
Okay.
So yes, it did.
Right.
But then sort of in the 2000 timeframe when everybody came in, there was already enough of these different schools that people did it, that people tried, that they had enough references that everything exploded. And then once it exploded, it's attracting the whole next wave.
Yeah.
Right? The number of startup schools in Austin today and innovation and education today, it just keeps going up every year. Right? We Alpha is starting all these different schools, right? Now we have the Texas Sports Academy and the Gifted School. We have the world's best Montessori educator who's building Montessorium. Right? It's because you can do that, because we have enough ecosystem, right? We have Waypoint, the wilderness school, right? That you need those families, and we have enough. So if you're sitting here saying, I want to start a new school, the second question is, can I find enough parents who will do it? And the answer is, the best place in the world to do that is Austin, Texas.
I just find it amazing, fascinating. I've heard you that stat before about the amount of people moving to Austin to send their kids here. And obviously that's a high agency. Like it's a different kind of person. It's like, I'm just going to find the best school of where I am versus, no, we're going to move. And so two questions on that. So one is, What do you think that does to like the talent level in Austin? Because these are obviously people who can really do things and change things. And the second, you succeed, Alpha, you have schools all around. Is this a temporary kind of arbitrage where they're going to come here versus like, no, I can stay in New York, I can stay in Miami, I can stay in Chicago or whatever, because I've got the school there.
I believe, in the 90s with Trilogy, my old company, where we brought in 2,000 Ivy League kids and jump-started and brought a lot of talent into Austin that ended up being significant. I believe today the schools in Austin are bringing in the families who are the talent that are the next 10 and 20 years of Austin talent. Like, this is it, which is, there is nothing parents care about more than raising their kids, right? It's just being in this market now forever. I mean, they literally will pack up and move across the world, right, to be able to do this. Also don't screw it up, because they get very upset if you do.
Well, final straw for us, where we looked at Austin for a number of years and hadn't made the move, and it was the schools were closed in California and they were open here. We're like, that's it, we're leaving.
Yeah, it's just the most important thing for a family or a society is raising the next generation, right? It is the most important thing to do. There is no higher purpose. And Austin's the best place in the world for it. And I believe that does just keep this positive cycle of attracting the best who then are in this environment. And I do believe, I'm a huge fan of school choice, which is back to selection effect. There is no one school for everybody, right? There's going to be, parents are going to be in a system where they're like, you know what, my first kid, my oldest is going to love that school. My youngest is going to love that school. Like, we only had Alpha. I have 2 daughters, right? And now as I look at the ecosystem, right, I'd be like, ooh, Kate would have loved Alpha GT, right? And my youngest daughter never would want to go to that school, right? And so I believe this whole concept of we're going to build this great ecosystem in Austin. We already have it, but it's just, so it's not a short-term arbitrage. This is going to be, Austin is going to be the center of education in America, probably the world. And I believe it's going to come because we are the ones on the positive cycle, that we have all those, network effects already building, where you have the families, you have the schools, that pulls in more educators, right? I talked to the world's best learning scientists. Right? Our team has the best learning scientists, and all the other learning scientists from around the world are like, I was talking to a couple who's over in London, and they're like, I guess we're moving to Austin because we need to be in this, right? We need to be in this for our kids. We have the world's best video game designers, right? And they're like, I guess we have to move to Austin because that's the center, is we're going to build the world's best educational video games, and we need to have our kids in these schools. So I believe all of that is happening, and I believe, if you're going to build, right, a world-leading city, it is built on education. That is it is the most important. We have UT, right? We are going to have an educational K through 12, right, which is the world's best.
I want to kind of go back to Trilogy, and you brought in a whole ton of young talent. And I just recorded another episode yesterday. I don't know which one's going to come out first. But one of the issues that we feel like in Austin is, if you are, 30 and above with a family, this is fantastic. Like, this is the place you should be coming in tech and that kind of thing. We're not necessarily getting the 25-year-olds, right? Or like, I'm going to go grind in New York or SF kind of thing. And even the case we're talking about, like these parents, that exact thing. And obviously, you try to deal with that. It sounds like it's been a problem for a while, which is what you tried to fix when you were Trilogy. And so one of the questions I have, when you have the new school, like, both UT, UATX, I know that the entrepreneurship school you guys are starting. I mean, is this something that's going to be like, it's going to be solved over the next 10 years because some of this is coming in? We just have to figure out the bridge of how do we get that 25-year-old software engineer to come here instead of New York, and like, we just need to bridge that? Or how do you think of that? I hear about the entrepreneurship school as well. What does college look like now? It's kind of changing, right?
Sure. So that's a whole set of things, but let's talk about it, which is, one is, yes, the reason that college towns, whether it was Silicon Valley because of Stanford, right, Harvard and MIT for Boston, right, those became systems because of the school foundation, right? And I believe with what we're building in the K through 12, especially because what is college going to become, and we'll talk about that. The K through 12 system, with what kids can do, right, is just remarkable. That they can do so much more than we expected. You don't have to go to college to drop out, as an example.
Someone in this room may have done that, you know.
And well, it's actually, as a program, there's a couple different dimensions that we'll go through. One is, so we're starting an entrepreneur school where, you know, in America, we believe if you're a sophomore or junior, you know, at Stanford, you can drop out and create $1 billion company. And if you said, you know, it's not likely, right? It's hard, it's rare, but it's totally doable. You're like, oh, okay. You know, that's something. That wasn't when I did it. That was a little.
You were in the early wave.
I was in the early wave, but now everybody's like, oh, okay, yeah, of course. Well, what happens? What is Stanford giving in those couple of years, right? What are they giving you as part of that experience that makes that a normalized? And can we take that and put it into our high school at Alpha High? And so we're going to be announcing. It's not announced yet officially, but we're going to be announcing an entrepreneur program. Where,
you guys put it on X, so
well, that was actually a recruiting where they're looking, they're pulling them out. There's actually, it'll have to be a more official one, but yes. So the program will be you can be a millionaire in high school, right? That we totally believe we have millionaires at Alpha, you know, kids who made $1 million, and we believe we can productize that in a replicable way. We're not committing to billionaires. We're picking this one.
You know,
we're starting here, but. Just that capability, which is, you know, we fundamentally believe, and when you look at school from our framing, you know, and once you get in it, you start thinking of, well, if the kids are learning 10 times faster and doing all these things, they can just do things that used to be adults did, but they're doing it in high school, right? All the hype around Alpha High is these things these kids are doing that's just crazy. It's not other kids get their kids, you know, into Ivy Leagues like we do and, you know, the best schools in the world, but they don't do what our kids do, which is we're going to have a student published in Nature. Right, the research journal, that is PhD level work. No high school kid has ever been able to do that before. And now, you know, we're going to be the first one, but I have a bunch of students right behind her who are like, oh, sometime in the next couple of years, I'm going to do the same thing. That something that was PhD level work, right, and very rare is going to be normalized in high school. On the millionaire side, we literally are going to normalize, yes, you know, high school kids can do this. And so we believe a lot of things get pulled down because AI gives kids superpowers. When you build an environment that's high standards and high support, they learn 10 times faster. You're like, well, what do they do all day? Yeah. And they go do amazing things, right? And so I absolutely believe that. And so then when you say what happens to your talent ecosystem in Austin, they're going to be like, well, you know, you can run the equivalent of Y Combinator for 4 years in Alpha High. Right. So instead of being 120 days, right, we have 4 years. Like part of our big discussion with when we were putting together this program, this founder program, we're like, what's their token budget? Because that's actually going to be a determining factor, right? And if you're going to be AI driven and build an AI first company.
Yeah, my son and I share an account and constantly run into problems.
And you fight over the tokens. You fight over the tokens. And it starts to be one of these things you have to manage as an entrepreneur. Back to, I told you, we have kids who make tens of thousands of dollars. We have one student who made $50,000. They spent $16,000 of tokens. Now, dumb me, it was on my school account, and so I paid it. And I'm like, dude, no, seriously, that's COGS for you.
Right.
Like, you're paying those now, right? And so new things, right? It's all new. It's new, innovative. But I believe these students who are going to be coming out of high school are going to have the capabilities that used to be required to be a 25-year-old startup founder, except you can do it here.
Well, and they become these. It's this. I picked many of them to do the $1 billion as their second company. Yeah. And you pulled it in because I remember, like, I think it was at the end of last year, we went to like the pitch day for the Alpha High. Yeah. And there was a really funny moment because my response to most of them was like, yeah, these they were all like, most of them were focused on loneliness. Like these feel really much like high school, teenage, like that's the product they're looking for. My son, of course, goes, finally somebody's building important products. So I was like, okay, if that's that. But your point is like,
you let them build what they love first, right, and then learn the market's not as big as if they do something else.
Well, and then, but they're not going to be like, I'm doing self-drive. Like the kinds of questions that are going to be these $1 billion things, they're just not exposed to those issues kind of yet. But if you think about like, you know, I think it was Elon's first company was like Zip2, and then it was PayPal, and then it was like, you have these, but if you can pull that down into high school, and you're like, oh, I had the startup pain this first, and then the kind of like, oh, it's not
the next one. And let's talk about college.
Yeah.
So I actually don't think college is completely going away like some people do, which is, I have 2 daughters, and they're both going to be at Stanford. The point is, it's too bad this is people at Austin are going to hear this, right? They need some more time. They need more maturity. Like they need to cook some more, right? They're not done yet. And being in a social environment with other kids, right? My older daughter's in a sorority, and you want that. You want them to grow up a little more versus go start your career immediately. I don't feel they're quite ready for that. And I believe there's a lot of parents who are like, okay, my kid may need a little more time. Now, the current college, I'm like, this is a train wreck, and it needs to completely change. And so we have 100 students coming to Austin this summer. We have MIT, they're from MIT and Stanford, NUT and UATX. And we're putting them all together all summer at Alpha to say, let's reinvent college. And what is this program really going to be? They all want to come because they're like, these colleges aren't doing what I want. And so what should the future of college be? And I believe we can absolutely design one. We believe it's going to look a lot like Alpha High on steroids, right? Where you're doing these great projects with, right, like-minded individuals on challenging projects. You'll be able to speed run, all your academics very quickly. It's the same thing. Like our average freshman SAT this year is like 1470. And, we have kids over 1,500 freshman year. And they're like, okay, I think we can get kids through the MCAT, right? Or the GMAT in 1 year, so then you can have all this time to do all these other great projects. So they're going to design it. It's all summer. They're all coming in. And what is it? But what you really want to think, a school is a bundle of things. Yeah. Socialization matters, right? That's my part with my daughters. I don't need more academics. They're self-driven learners. They can learn whatever they want, right? The part is I want them exposed to different groups. At Stanford, when I was there, IE 273 was like the class where it was the venture capital class where you had to write a business plan and every guest was every leader. And Steve Jobs came in.
Yeah, we were having dinner last night with some other Alpha parents, and it was the first time all of us were talking about, like, do our kids need to go to college? I don't know the answer. We've got some more years because, one of the parents went to Stanford, and like, if you break it down, it was like, we just said the network effect. Okay, that's kind of happening now here. Totally. And like, so they can be exposed to amazing people and these kind of things. You have the learning. Well, okay, if they spent all this time and like, one of the challenges I'm concerned with is my son's, he thinks he's going to be done with calculus in like freshman year or ninth grade. And it's like, okay, so what's the rest? Because you don't need to go like into like, the crazy levels of math unless he wants to kind of thing. And then it's the socialization. So there's this kind of question of like, okay, like, half your 3/4 of the bundle or 2/3 of the bundle is gone. Like you don't need that anymore. So it's kind of we're in a very interesting time.
No, and I totally agree with that. Exactly what you're saying is we're pulling these things down. Now, we think we're going to be able to create, a university experience where you're like, I don't need all this other academic, enrichment side because I crushed through it. But there was all the socialization or skills building or projects I worked on with other people, right? You found your co-founders at Stanford. And so you're like, let's make sure we find our co-founders. You find them in high school, great. You aggregate a bigger group, usually at a university. And so you get co-founders, and then just the scale of your ambition goes up and capability. And so you're like, no, I'm not going to do the teen angst apps. I'm going to do the significant billion-dollar change the world businesses. That's sort of what we believe the transition will be here. And so we'll see. We'll see if that, it's a new area, but those things, when you talk about what is valuable to the kids, you do realize our old frame is gone.
Yeah.
And we need to throw it out and start over and figure out what they can do. And, obviously all the Alpha families believe my kid can do so much more than I ever expected and can do it much younger than I ever expected. And it's an optimistic view of what AI is going to do to the world, right? There's, and just talking about school and what we think is important, there's AI, we believe in rational optimism. We believe you should not take a 10-year-old and try to doom them and tell them they're doomed and tell them the world's doomed. We just don't see how that's productive with a 10-year-old. We believe you need rational optimism, not unfounded, right? A rational, optimistic framework. And our students, when you think about, if you're an Uber driver in Austin, right, and you got the robotaxis and Waymos and everything else, it's not going to be good, right? It's not going to be good for you. You're going to have to go through transition. Our students at Alpha are very much that, you parents, you guys may be cooked, but we're going to crush it. right? That AI enables us to do things that you guys couldn't do. You still can't do. Right? That you guys couldn't do this, and we can. And so we're ready to take on the world. And that's the magic. I have Austin Way, who's one of my juniors, and he's like, how much do you spend on time back, Mr. Liemandt? Because I'm going to write one better.
Oh, I saw that.
And I'm going to be No, he is. And no, we actually, it was really interesting is yesterday we were debating something. And I was like, you're wrong, Austin. He's like, I'm going to prove you wrong. And I'm like, one of us is going to learn something. And I hope it's me.
Right.
I do hope it's me, right, on this stuff. And this is the kind of thing that these kids, when you give them, equip them, it doesn't have to be this negative spiral, right? And as a parent, McKinsey's phrase is, it's the best time in history to be a 5-year-old. And we very much believe that. And we believe that, the Austin educational system is going to prove that to the rest of the world, right? The reason the Governors Association, the National Governors Association comes out, right? The Secretary of Education, right? At the White House, right? McKinsey was presenting to dozens of first ladies around the world, right? They're all coming to Austin, right? To see what is going on here, because in this time of change with AI, the solution is all in the kids, right? And we are in Austin, we are owning that and dominating that.
We're proving that they get superpowers, not this like, get rid of all the data centers because you're going to destroy all this. Like, no, the future is not like AI generally. I think they have a messaging problem because it's like, give the kids they can do more than I can do now.
And to how we started it, there is bad AI and bad screen, and don't let them do screen time. But there is a right way to do it. And we just need to educate all the parents, and they need to see it. And you're like, do it the right way and look at the magic. And when your kid's thriving, everything else works a lot better.
Yes. All right. So we could definitely keep on going, but I know we're at time. Kind of end with the same question always. Is like, when you're looking ahead, like what's the next hinge point experiment? Like the thing that you're looking at that's going to be, critical going forward.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's education in Austin, which is that, if we're going to build, the city, I've been here since 92, and it's, been blown and going since the beginning. I believe the acceleration of the curve, in my view, is all going to be around education, because this is your talent pipeline for the next 20 years. It's the capability. And these kids are the ones who are going to be accelerating it, right? This is your talent pipeline for existing companies, but all these new companies, all these new ideas, what is the structure of the future, right? What's the company of the future? How are they going to be built? I'm telling you, Austin Way has a better chance of figuring out what is the future company that's going to be built than some venture capitalist in some other city trying to figure it out there. And one last thing is hold us to high standards. We ever drop the ball, never promise we won't drop the ball. We drop the ball, we'll be on it all over it.
I 100% will do that.
Thank you.